Hey there, welcome back. I'm here to help you relax tonight. Before we slip into the shadows, like and subscribe to uncover more stories like this. Let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? It really brings our community together. Now dim the lights for that cozy vibe and stick around till the end. Let's dive into the unknown. I took a job at the most remote weather station in Washington state, and the pay was 3 times what I should have been making. That should have been my first clue that something was wrong. My name is Gavin Prescott, and for the last 8 years, I've been stationed at Cascade Point Weather Observatory, perched on a ridgeline in the North Cascades at an elevation of 6,800 feet. We're so isolated that supplies only come in once a month by helicopter. And even that depends on weather conditions that cooperate maybe half the time. The nearest town is Marble Mount, about 40 miles as the crow flies, but you can't get there directly from here. The terrain is too rugged, the forest too dense. If you tried to hike out, you'd be dead within a week. Most people assume weather stations are automated these days, and they're right for the most part. But Cascade Point is different. The official explanation is that our location experiences such extreme and unpredictable conditions that human oversight is essential. Temperatures can swing 60 degrees in a single day. We've recorded wind gusts exceeding 140 miles per hour. The snowpack regularly reaches 30 feet during winter months. According to the National Weather Service, Cascade Point provides critical data for avalanche forecasting, flight safety, and climate research across the entire Pacific Northwest. That's the official story. The real reason we're here, though, that's something else entirely. I arrived in March of 2017, fresh out of my atmospheric sciences program at Oregon State. The job posting had been oddly specific, seeking meteorologist for extended isolated assignment. Must be comfortable with solitude, able to work independently and willing to follow unconventional protocols. Experience with anomalous weather patterns preferred. That last line caught my attention. Anomalous weather patterns. It suggested something beyond standard atmospheric research, something unusual. I was 26 years old and hungry for experience that would set me apart. I applied immediately. The interview process was unlike anything I'd encountered. No video calls, just old-fashioned phone conversations with someone who identified himself only as Dr. Lundgren, the station director. He asked strange questions. How do you respond to situations that lack rational explanation? Have you ever experienced phenomena you couldn't scientifically categorize? If instructed to perform a task that seemed illogical, would you comply? I answered honestly, admitting that I valued empirical evidence, but remained open to expanding my understanding. 2 days later, I received an offer letter and a plane ticket to Seattle. The helicopter ride to Cascade Point took 2 hours. The landscape below transforming from suburban sprawl to wilderness that looked like it had never seen human presence. The pilot, a weathered man who introduced himself as Hugh, offered minimal conversation. When I asked about the station, he simply said, "Follow the rules, and you'll be fine." He wouldn't elaborate. We landed on a concrete pad surrounded by 4 main structures. The central building housed the monitoring equipment, communications, and living quarters. A separate generator building ensured backup power. A smaller structure contained our emergency supplies and equipment storage. And finally, there was what Hugh called the old observation post, a stone building that looked like it predated the other structures by decades. Nobody uses that one anymore, Hugh said as we unloaded my gear. "Stay out of it." Dr. Lundgren met me on the landing pad. He was in his mid-50s, tall and lean with silver hair and the kind of face that revealed nothing about what he was thinking. "Welcome to Cascade Point, Mr. Prescott. I trust your journey was uneventful." His handshake was firm, businesslike. "Smooth enough," I replied, though I'm eager to learn more about the research being conducted here. "All in good time," Lundgren said, gesturing toward the main building. "First, let's get you oriented." The interior was more comfortable than I'd expected. Modern equipment filled the monitoring room, multiple computer screens displaying real-time atmospheric data, satellite imagery, and sensor readings from instruments scattered across the ridgeline. The living quarters were modest but functional, with separate bedrooms for the 3-person crew, a shared kitchen and common area. Everything was clean, organized, and surprisingly well-maintained for such a remote location. "You'll be working primarily with Ingrid Haas, our senior meteorologist," Lundgren explained. "She's been here 5 years and knows the protocols better than anyone. Our third team member, Klaus Jorgensen, handles equipment maintenance and technical operations. He's currently out checking the Western Array sensors." A woman emerged from the monitoring room. She was probably in her early 30s with blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and sharp blue eyes that assessed me quickly. "Ingrid," she said simply, extending her hand. No smile, no warmth, just professional acknowledgement. "Gavin, good to meet you." "We'll see," she replied cryptically before turning to Lundgren. "The evening readings are showing pressure anomalies again, Sector 4. Lundgren's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Noted in the log. We'll discuss it during the evening briefing." He turned back to me. "Mr. Prescott, before you begin work, there are protocols you must understand. Cascade Point operates under specific rules that may seem unusual, but they exist for very good reasons. Non-compliance is grounds for immediate evacuation and termination." He handed me a laminated card, smaller than a playing card but heavy, as if made from something denser than ordinary plastic. 8 rules were printed in neat block letters. Rule 1. Between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., all personnel must remain inside the central building with doors locked. External sensors and cameras are not to be monitored during this window. Any alarms triggered during these hours are to be acknowledged but not investigated until 4:01 a.m. Rule 2. The old observation post is off limits to all personnel at all times. If you observe lights or movement inside that structure, report it immediately to Dr. Lundgren. Do not investigate. Do not approach. Rule 3. If you encounter handprints on the exterior windows, mark their location on the station map, but do not clean them. Dr. Lundgren will handle removal personally. Never touch the prints with bare skin. Rule 4. All deceased wildlife found within 100 yards of the station must be documented with precise location, species identification, and physical description in the yellow ledger kept in the equipment storage. Photography is permitted only from a minimum distance of 10 feet. Do not touch or move the remains. Rule 5. If you receive radio communication in any language other than English, respond only with "message not understood, please repeat in English." If the foreign language continues, terminate the transmission immediately and log the incident. Do not attempt translation. Rule 6. Between November and March, if you observe the northern lights visible from this latitude, immediately check the equipment storage building. If the door is ajar, Close and lock it without looking inside. Report the incident to Dr. Lundgren. Rule 7. Any personnel experiencing recurring dreams about descending into underground spaces must report them immediately. Under no circumstances should you follow instructions received in such dreams. Rule 8. If Klaus Jorgensen tells you to run the midnight calibration, regardless of the actual time, immediately proceed to the communications room and radio for emergency evacuation. This is not a drill. I read through the list twice, waiting for someone to tell me this was some kind of initiation hazing. When I looked up, both Lundgren and Ingrid were watching me with absolute seriousness. These are highly specific, I managed. They're based on 8 years of operational experience, Lundgren replied. Each rule exists because of an incident or pattern that required a protocol response. You're not required to understand them. You're only required to follow them. And if I don't, then you'll discover why the rules exist, Ingrid said flatly. The person you replaced lasted 6 weeks. He thought Rule 2 was superstitious nonsense and decided to investigate the old observation post. What happened to him? Lundgren's expression remained neutral. He requested immediate evacuation and submitted his resignation the same day. He wouldn't discuss what he'd encountered. Now, do you have any questions about your duties that don't involve the rules? I had 1,000 questions, but I recognized that none of them would be answered at this moment. No, sir, I'm ready to begin. Excellent. Ingrid will show you your quarters and the monitoring systems. We'll have a full briefing at 1800 hours. Welcome to Cascade Point, Mr. Prescott. I hope you'll find the work illuminating. My first 2 weeks passed without incident. The work itself was fascinating. Cascade Point's elevation and location created microclimates that shifted rapidly and unpredictably. I documented temperature inversions that defied standard atmospheric models, wind patterns that seemed to reverse direction without any logical meteorological cause, precipitation that fell in perfectly geometric patterns, hexagonal snow crystals the size of dinner plates. Ingrid was professional but distant, answering my technical questions with precision while avoiding any personal conversation. Klaus, whom I met on my second day, was more approachable. He was a stocky man in his 40s with a perpetual smile and hands that seemed capable of repairing anything. "Don't let the rules freak you out too much," he told me while showing me the generator systems. "They seem crazy until you've been here long enough to understand why they exist. Then they seem absolutely essential." "How long have you been here?" I asked. 3 years. Long enough to see things that changed how I understand reality. Not long enough to stop being surprised. "Can you tell me what kinds of things?" Klaus considered for a moment. "Let's just say that weather isn't the only thing being monitored here. Cascade Point sits on top of something. A geological formation, an electromagnetic anomaly, maybe something else entirely. Whatever it is, it creates effects the conventional science doesn't have frameworks for explaining. The rules help us coexist with those effects safely." "That's remarkably vague," I pointed out. "It's deliberately vague," he agreed. "You'll understand soon enough. And when you do, you'll appreciate not having too much information up front. Some knowledge is easier to process when you discover it gradually." On my 15th night at the station, I experienced my first rule-related incident. I was on the overnight monitoring shift, which ran from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. Ingrid had the evening shift before me, and Klaus was off duty. Dr. Lundgren maintained unpredictable hours, sometimes present during night shifts, sometimes absent for days at a time. At 1:47 a.m., I was reviewing precipitation data when I heard something outside. A sound like metal scraping against stone, rhythmic and deliberate. The external microphones we used for wind monitoring picked it up clearly. I pulled up the audio waveform and there it was. A steady pattern, 3 scrapes, pause, 2 scrapes, pause, repeat. My training told me to check the external cameras to identify the source. My hand was reaching for the camera controls when I remembered Rule 1. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., external sensors and cameras are not to be monitored. I checked the time, 1:48 a.m., 12 minutes until the blackout window. The scraping continued, growing louder. I forced myself to focus on my data entry, logging atmospheric readings, updating predictive models, anything to distract myself from the sound. At 1:53, it changed. The pattern shifted to 5 rapid scrapes followed by what sounded like knocking. 3 distinct impacts. 7 minutes until 2 a.m. The knocking repeated, louder this time. It sounded like it was coming from directly outside the monitoring room window, the window that faced the old observation post. 5 minutes. The knocking became aggressive, almost frantic. Impact after impact. But when I glanced at the window, I couldn't see anything through the darkness outside. No movement, no shape, nothing to explain the sound. 3 minutes. I gripped the edge of my desk, fighting every instinct that told me to investigate. Scientists are trained to observe, to gather data, to understand phenomena through direct examination. Deliberately ignoring an unexplained event felt like a betrayal of everything I'd studied. 1 minute. The knocking stopped abruptly. Silence fell, so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat. Then a new sound emerged, barely audible at first, but growing steadily louder. Whistling. A melody I didn't recognize, but something about it felt ancient, wrong somehow, like hearing a recording played backward. 2 a.m. The whistling cut off mid-note, leaving an absence of sound that felt heavier than silence. I sat frozen at my desk, every nerve in my body screaming that something was standing just outside the window, inches away, separated only by a thin pane of glass. For the next 2 hours, I heard nothing. No wind, no ambient forest sounds, no indication of the world continuing outside our small bubble of light and human presence. I kept my eyes locked on my monitors, documenting data with trembling hands, hyper-aware of the windows behind me and the darkness pressing against them. At 4:01 a.m., the world resumed. Wind sounds returned. The subtle creaks and groans of the building settling. The distant call of a bird that shouldn't have been active at this hour. I immediately checked the external cameras as the rules permitted, scanning the area around the monitoring room window. Nothing. No footprints in the thin layer of snow. No disturbance of any kind. But when I pulled up the audio files from the external microphones and checked the recordings from midnight until now, there was nothing there. No scraping, no knocking, no whistling. Just normal ambient sound throughout the entire period. I sat there staring at the waveforms, knowing with absolute certainty what I had heard, seeing no evidence it had occurred. Your first blackout window experience. I spun in my chair. Dr. Lundgren stood in the doorway, dressed as if he'd been awake for hours. How long had he been there? I heard something, I said, between 1:47 and 2 a.m. and then again at exactly 2. But the recordings show nothing. The recordings never do, Lundgren replied, entering the room. Whatever manifests during those hours exists in a way that most of our instruments can't detect. We call it the adjustment period. It's when Cascade Point's unique properties are most active. What properties exactly? Lundgren studied me for a long moment. Tell me, Mr. Prescott, what do you know about electromagnetic fields and their effects on human consciousness? The basics. Strong electromagnetic fields can cause hallucinations, feelings of dread, even visual phenomena. It's well documented. Indeed. And what if I told you that Cascade Point sits atop a geological formation that generates electromagnetic fields unlike anything documented elsewhere? Fields that fluctuate in ways that seem to respond to human presence, that create effects far beyond simple hallucinations? I'd say that sounds like something that should be studied extensively. It is being studied, Lundgren said quietly. By us. The weather monitoring is real and valuable, but it's also convenient cover for our primary research. We're attempting to understand something that conventional scientific frameworks struggle to categorize. And the rules? The rules represent our current best practices for safe operation. They're derived from 8 years of trial and error. And yes, there were errors. Personnel who experienced psychological breaks, equipment failures that couldn't be explained. One researcher who simply walked into the forest and was never found. He moved to the window, looking out at the darkness. The entity or phenomenon that manifests during the blackout hours seems to test boundaries. It probes, explores, attempts to establish some form of contact or interaction. We found that denying it observation, refusing to engage, reduces the intensity of manifestations. Hence, Rule 1. You're telling me there's something intelligent out there? I'm telling you there's something that exhibits behavior patterns suggesting intentionality. Whether that constitutes intelligence as we understand it remains an open question. He turned back to me. You handled your first exposure well, Mr. Prescott. Many people can't resist checking the cameras or investigating the sounds. That curiosity has consequences. What kind of consequences? Lundgren's expression darkened. The kind that lead to Rule 8 existing. He wouldn't elaborate further, but I understood the message. Follow the rules, or discover firsthand why they were created. I chose to follow the rules. April brought spring conditions to the Cascades, though at our elevation. That meant temperatures barely reaching above freezing in snow that melted during the day, only to refreeze each night. The weather patterns remained fascinatingly chaotic, but I'd grown more comfortable with the monitoring routines and the station's rhythms. I'd also grown more comfortable with my colleagues. Ingrid remained reserved, but I'd learned she'd worked at 3 other remote research stations before Cascade Point, and this was by far the strangest. In Antarctica, the isolation was the challenge, she told me during a meal. Here, the isolation is protective. I'm not sure I could handle being closer to whatever this place amplifies. Klaus was more open about his experiences. You've made it through your first blackout period without freaking out, so you're doing better than most. Wait until you encounter your first handprint situation. That's when things get really weird. He was referring to Rule 3 about handprints on windows. I'd read the rule dozens of times but hadn't encountered the actual situation. How often does that happen? I asked. Irregularly. Sometimes weeks between incidents, sometimes multiple times in a single night. They appear on exterior windows, always during or shortly after precipitation events. Rain, snow, doesn't matter. And they're not normal handprints. What do you mean? You'll see. Just remember, don't touch them with bare skin. The one person who did, well, he's the reason we added that specific warning to the rule. On April 19th, we had our first significant rainfall of the season, a steady downpour that lasted for 14 hours. I was on evening shift when Ingrid called me to the western observation window. There, she said, pointing. At first, I saw only rain streaming down the glass. Then I noticed them. Handprints, but not like any I'd seen before. They appeared to be pressed against the outside of the window, but the rain flowed around them rather than through them. 5 fingers, normal proportions, but the prints themselves had texture, depth, as if the hands pressing against the glass had left an impression in reality itself rather than merely a residue. Mark the location, Ingrid instructed, handing me the station map. I noted the exact window and approximate positions of the prints. There were 6 of them, arranged in a pattern that suggested someone had been standing outside, hands pressed against the glass at chest height, face probably inches from the window, looking in. Do we know what causes this? I asked. Dr. Lundgren has theories. Something about the electromagnetic field, creating persistent patterns in molecular structures. The handprints are apparently stable for days, until he performs whatever removal procedure he uses. Have you seen him do it? She shook her head. He always does it alone, usually during the blackout hours. I've asked, but he says the procedure requires knowledge that's complicated to transfer. Over the next week, more handprints appeared, sometimes on the same windows, sometimes on new ones. I mapped each occurrence, noting patterns. They appeared more frequently on windows facing the old observation post. They clustered around the monitoring room and living quarters, but never appeared on the generator building or equipment storage. On April 27th, I made an observation that disturbed me more than the handprints themselves. I was reviewing my maps, tracking the patterns, when I noticed something. The number of handprints was increasing. The first night, 6 prints. 2 nights later, 11, then 17, then 23. It wasn't random. Something was escalating. I brought my analysis to Dr. Lundgren. He studied my maps in silence before looking up. You have a good eye for patterns, Mr. Prescott. Yes, the manifestations are increasing in frequency and intensity. This happens periodically, usually correlating with certain atmospheric conditions. What kind of conditions? Strong low-pressure systems moving through the region, increased precipitation, high humidity, essentially conditions that increase atmospheric conductivity. He returned my maps. There's a natural cycle to it. The escalation will continue for another week or 2, then decline. We simply need to maintain protocols during the peak period. And if the protocols aren't enough, Lundgren's pause was telling, then we evacuate until conditions stabilize. That's happened twice since the station was established. Both times when we returned, we found evidence that something had entered the buildings during our absence. What kind of evidence? The kind that convinced us the rules needed to be stricter. On May 3rd, I was performing routine maintenance on the Western Array sensors, a collection of instruments about 200 yards from the main building. It was mid-afternoon, clear skies, temperature around 45 degrees, perfect working conditions. Klaus was with me. We always traveled in pairs when working outside the immediate station perimeter. Hey Gavin, come look at this. Klaus called from near the tree line. I found him crouched near a fallen log, examining something on the ground. As I approached, I saw it, a dead marmot, but something about it was profoundly wrong. The animal lay on its side, outwardly intact, but its body was compressed. Not injured or decomposed, but literally compressed, as if something had reduced its three-dimensional form partially into 2 dimensions. Its fur was smooth against flattened flesh, bones visible through skin that had become translucent. Rule 4, Klaus said quietly. We need to document this. I pulled out my camera and took photos from exactly 10 feet away, as specified. The images didn't capture the wrongness of what we were seeing. The way the marmot seemed to exist in fewer spatial dimensions than everything around it. How many of these have you found? I asked while Klaus recorded detailed notes in the yellow ledger. Maybe a dozen over 3 years. Different species, always the same effect. Dr. Lundgren calls them compression casualties. Something about the electromagnetic field occasionally affecting biological tissue in ways that shouldn't be possible. This violates several laws of physics. Yeah, that's kind of the theme around here, Klaus replied. The laws of physics work about 90% of the time at Cascade Point. It's the other 10% that requires rules. We finished our documentation and returned to the station. I reviewed our photos, trying to understand what could cause such an effect. Extreme pressure? But there was no damage to surrounding vegetation. Dimensional warping? That was science fiction, not science. Yet I'd seen the evidence myself, photographed it, measured it. That night during my shift, I reviewed all the compression casualty documentation from previous years. 14 incidents total, various species from small rodents to a young deer. Always found within 100 yards of the station, always exhibiting the same impossible flattening effect. And most disturbing, the frequency was increasing. 2 incidents in 2017, 3 in 2018, 4 in 2019, 5 so far in 2020. Something was growing stronger. May brought warmer temperatures and longer days, but also an increase in phenomena that made the rules feel less like precautions and more like thin barriers against something that wanted in. The handprints appeared nightly now, dozens of them, covering nearly every window facing the forest. Dr. Lundgren performed his removal procedures daily, but they reappeared as soon as conditions allowed. On May the 17th, I experienced Rule 5's relevance. I was monitoring radio frequencies as part of our routine atmospheric electromagnetic monitoring when I picked up a signal. Clear, strong, and definitely human in origin. But the language wasn't English. It wasn't any language I recognized, though the cadence and structure suggested human speech. The voice was female, speaking rapidly, almost urgently. I remembered the rule. Respond only with message not understood. Please repeat in English. If the foreign language continues, terminate immediately. I keyed the transmitter. Cascade Point Station. Message not understood. Please repeat in English. The voice stopped mid-sentence. Silence for approximately 5 seconds. Then it resumed. The same language, the same urgent cadence. But now I could hear something else underneath the words. A second voice, lower, speaking in synchronization, but slightly out of phase. Like 2 recordings of the same speech, played with fractional delay. I terminated the transmission and logged the incident immediately. Time, 2:34 p.m. Frequency, 151.3 megahertz. Duration, approximately 45 seconds. Language, unknown. Additional details, dual voice effect, suggesting Suggesting spatial displacement, Dr. Lundgren said from behind me. I really needed to put a bell on him. Excuse me? He gestured to my log entry. The dual voice effect occurs when a transmission originates from two spatial locations simultaneously. We've documented this phenomenon 17 times. It appears to be an attempt at establishing communication through radio frequency exploitation. An attempt by what? That's the question we're working to answer. Lundgren pulled up archived audio files. Listen to this. He played a recording similar to what I'd just heard. Female voice, unknown language. But this recording was longer, lasting nearly 3 minutes. As it played, the dual voice effect became more pronounced, then tripled, then multiplied into a chorus of slightly out-of-phase voices, all speaking in eerie synchronization. This was recorded 2 years ago, Lundgren explained. The researcher monitoring that shift didn't terminate the transmission. He allowed it to continue, attempting to record enough sample data for linguistic analysis. By the time he finally cut the connection, the voice count had reached an estimated 47 distinct but synchronized speakers. What happened to him? He began speaking in the same language, unconsciously at first, muttering phrases during sleep. Within a week, he was having full conversations in a language he'd never studied, responding to questions that nobody else could hear. We had to evacuate him. Last I heard, he was in a long-term psychiatric facility, still speaking a language that no linguist has been able to identify or translate. I looked at my radio equipment with new wariness. So what are they saying? We don't know. We've submitted recordings to every linguistic database and expert we can contact, without revealing too much about the source. No matches. The structure suggests language, human language even, but no documented human language that currently exists or has existed in recorded history. Could it be something non-human, attempting to mimic human speech? Lundgren's expression was unreadable. That's one hypothesis. The other is that it's perfectly human, just displaced in time or dimension in a way that distorts it into incomprehensibility. Either possibility is deeply troubling. The incident disturbed me more than the handprints or even the compression casualties. Those were observable physical phenomena, strange but tangible. This was different. This suggested something intelligent attempting communication, and our only protocol was to refuse that communication. What if it was important? What if something was trying to warn us? But I remembered the researcher speaking in an unknown language, lost in conversations with voices only he could hear. Some communication isn't meant to be understood. Some messages come with costs too high to pay. 3 days later, Rule 6 became relevant. We were well into May, but at 6,800 feet elevation, cold snaps still occurred. On May 20th, temperatures dropped suddenly as a high-pressure system moved through, bringing crystal-clear skies and unusual atmospheric conditions. I was outside performing evening readings when I noticed them. Auroras. The northern lights, visible as shimmering curtains of green and violet against the darkening sky. Beautiful, mesmerizing, and according to every atmospheric model I knew, absolutely impossible at this latitude. Rule 6 flashed in my memory. Between November and March, if you observe northern lights visible from this latitude, immediately check the equipment storage building. If the door is ajar, close and lock it without looking inside. But it was May, outside the specified time frame. The rule shouldn't apply. Still, something made me check. I walked to the equipment storage building, approaching cautiously in the strange light of the impossible auroras. The door was open, just slightly, perhaps 6 inches of darkness visible in the gap. The rule said November through March only. It was May 20th. This shouldn't be covered by the protocol, but the auroras shouldn't exist at all, and somehow they did, painting the sky with lights that had no business being visible this far south. I reached for the door, intending to simply close it as general security procedure. My hand was inches from the handle when Ingrid's voice cut through the twilight. "Don't touch it, back away slowly." She was standing about 20 feet behind me, her expression grave. "The rule says November through March," I started. "The rule says that because those are the months when atmospheric conditions typically allow the auroras to manifest here. But the aurora itself is the warning, not the calendar date. If you see them, the rule applies." But I was just going to close the door. "Without looking inside?" she challenged. "From here, I can see you were leaning forward trying to see what was in there. That's looking inside." She was right. I had been. Curiosity is a powerful force, especially for scientists trained to observe and document. Ingrid moved past me, approaching the door with deliberate movements. Without pausing, without even glancing into the gap, she pushed the door closed and engaged the lock. Rule 6 exists because what gets into that building during aurora manifestations isn't from our immediate spatial location. Meaning what? Meaning that during these events, the equipment storage building seems to connect to somewhere else. The door is both here and there simultaneously. Whatever's on the other side will sometimes try to cross over. Looking inside establishes a form of contact that makes crossing easier. "Has anyone looked?" Her expression answered before her words did. "Once, the station's first year, a researcher named Agnes Dunbar. She thought the rule was superstitious nonsense. When the auroras appeared, she not only looked inside, she stepped through the door to investigate. And she came back out 3 minutes later by our observation. But she insisted she'd been inside for 3 weeks. She was suffering from severe dehydration and malnutrition despite having been absent only minutes. Her hair had grown several inches, and she wouldn't stop talking about the city she'd seen inside, a city that existed in geometric impossibility, where the sky was the ground and the ground was above. Ingrid locked the equipment storage building's external padlock for good measure. Agnes was evacuated the next day. She died 2 months later from complications doctors couldn't explain. Her autopsy revealed that her internal organs had partially reversed their positions, not surgically, but as if they'd developed that way. Her heart was slightly more right than left. Her liver split between sides. We walked back to the main building in silence, the impossible auroras still dancing overhead. I didn't look back at the equipment storage building, didn't wonder what might be on the other side of that door. Some knowledge isn't worth acquiring. By June, I'd been at Cascade Point for 3 months and had encountered manifestations related to 6 of the 8 rules. I'd learned to view the protocols not as arbitrary restrictions, but as hard-won survival strategies. Yet 2 rules remained theoretical for me. Rule 7 about dreams and Rule 8, the emergency evacuation code. On June 8th, that changed. I woke from my first dream about underground spaces around 3 a.m. It was vivid in a way normal dreams aren't, possessing a clarity and consistency that felt more like memory than imagination. In the dream, I was descending a staircase carved from stone. The walls were close, pressing in, lit by a phosphorescent glow that had no source. The air was cool and smelled of minerals and something else, something organic and ancient. A voice called to me from below. Not words exactly, but meaning conveyed directly into understanding. Come down, see what's beneath. Learn what Cascade Point really monitors. Come down and understand. The stairs descended impossibly far, spiraling deeper and deeper. I wanted to turn back, but my dream self kept walking, kept descending, drawn by curiosity and the promise of answers. Just as I reached a landing where multiple tunnels branched in different directions, I woke. The dream faded somewhat as I lay there, but not entirely. Usually dreams evaporate within minutes of waking. This one remained crystalline, detailed, as if it had been carved into my memory rather than imagined by my sleeping mind. I checked the clock. 3:27 a.m., I was in the blackout period. Outside my window, I heard nothing, that same heavy silence that characterized the adjustment hours. But inside my head, I could still hear that voice. Come down, we're waiting. Come down and see. I lay awake until 4 a.m., when the world resumed its normal sounds. Then I went to find Dr. Lundgren. He was already awake, working at his desk despite the early hour. When I explained the dream, his expression became very serious. Describe the staircase in detail, he instructed. I did, recalling the stone walls, the phosphorescent glow, the spiraling descent, the branching tunnels. Lundgren listened without interruption, then pulled out a file folder. Inside were hand-drawn sketches, detailed architectural drawings of the exact staircase I dreamed about. Different handwriting, different artistic styles, but unmistakably the same location rendered by multiple people. 6 other researchers have reported this dream over the station's operation, he explained. Always the same staircase, always the same voice calling them down. The dreams recur, becoming more frequent and more insistent over time. The voice begins giving specific instructions, directions to find the entrance. The access point supposedly exists somewhere within Cascade Point's grounds. Does it exist, I mean? We've never found physical evidence of it, but he hesitated. 2 researchers followed the dream instructions. Both disappeared. We found no bodies, no evidence of them leaving the station area. They simply weren't there one day during bed checks. You think they found it, the entrance? I think something wants them to believe it exists. Whether the staircase is real or simply a construct used to lure people somewhere or someone else, the effect is the same. People vanish. He closed the file. Rule 7 exists because we can't prevent the dreams themselves, only respond to them. You're to report any recurrence immediately. If the dreams begin providing specific instructions or directions, you're to be evacuated until they cease. Have they ever stopped? The dreams? For some people, yes, after evacuation and several months away from Cascade Point's influence. For others, he didn't finish the sentence. I returned to my quarters but didn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about those sketches. Different people across different years, all dreaming the same impossible architecture, all hearing the same voice, all being called to descend. 3 nights later, the dream returned. The same staircase, the same descent, but this time I progressed further. I passed the branching tunnels and continued down, down, down until the stairs ended at a massive door, bronze or brass, covered in symbols that looked ancient, but that I somehow understood. They read, "Those who monitor become the monitored. Those who observe become the observed. Come inside and trade roles. The voice was clearer now, multiple voices actually speaking in harmony. "We're waiting. We've always been waiting. Come down and complete the cycle. Come down and understand what you're really monitoring." My hand reached for the door handle. I woke, gasping, heart racing. 2:47 a.m., still in the blackout window, and I knew with absolute certainty that if I'd opened that door in the dream, something would have changed irreversibly. I reported the dream to Dr. Lundgren at breakfast. His response was immediate. "You're being escalated." The progression from first dream to door encounter took other researchers weeks. For you, it's been 3 days. What does that mean? It means something is pushing harder than usual. We need to consider temporary evacuation until... Klaus burst into the dining area, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by stark fear. "The old observation post. There are lights inside." Rule 2. The old observation post is off limits. If you observe lights or movement inside, report immediately. Do not investigate. We all rushed to the windows facing the stone building. Sure enough, light flickered in the narrow windows of the observation post, pale and phosphorescent. The same quality of light I'd seen in my dreams of the underground staircase. "How long?" Lundgren demanded. "I just noticed it when I came on shift 10 minutes ago," Klaus replied. As we watched, shapes moved past the windows inside the observation post. Silhouettes. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too tall, proportions slightly off, moving with a fluidity that looked unnatural. "Everyone back from the windows," Lundgren ordered. "Klaus, run the midnight calibration." Klaus went white. "You're sure?" "Run it now." Klaus sprinted toward the communications room. I stood frozen, watching the impossible lights in the supposedly abandoned building, trying to understand what I was seeing. Ingrid grabbed my arm. "We need to pack. 5 minutes for essentials only." "What's happening?" "Rule 8, she said grimly. "The emergency evacuation code. When Lundgren tells Klaus to run the midnight calibration, it means the situation has exceeded our ability to safely maintain position. We leave immediately." "But we can't just abandon the station." Lundgren was already at the communications panel, radio handset pressed to his ear. "This is Cascade Point requesting emergency evacuation. Priority Alpha. Multiple containment breaches. We need extraction now." Static answered him. He adjusted frequencies, tried again. More static. "The auroras are interfering with communications," he said tersely. I looked out the northern window. Sure enough, the impossible auroras were back, painting the sky with lights that shouldn't exist at this latitude, in this season, at this time of day. It was 8 a.m., and the sky looked like midnight filled with spectral colors. Klaus returned from the communications room. "The satellite link is down. Radio frequencies are filled with that multi-voice transmission in the unknown language. I can't get a clear signal out." "Then we hike," Lundgren decided. "We have emergency packs with 3 days' supplies. 40 miles through rough terrain, but we don't have alternatives." We gathered our emergency packs, pre-packed bags containing essentials for exactly this scenario. As I hoisted mine onto my shoulders, I glanced out the window one more time. The lights in the old observation post had changed. They were brighter now, and the shapes moving inside were pressing against the windows. Handprints appeared on the glass, dozens of them, those same impossible prints that left impressions in reality itself. And then the door of the observation post opened. Nothing came out. The doorway simply stood open, revealing an interior that shouldn't exist. The building was maybe 30 feet across, but the space beyond that doorway stretched back impossibly far. I could see the stone staircase from my dreams, spiraling down into phosphorescent depths. "Don't look at it," Ingrid hissed, physically turning my head away. "That's how it gets stronger. Observation feeds it." We exited through the eastern door, the one facing away from the observation post, and began our descent from the ridgeline. The terrain was brutal, steep slopes covered in loose rock and snow patches. The weather was deteriorating rapidly, temperature dropping, wind increasing. The auroras overhead seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. We'd made it perhaps 2 miles when Klaus stopped abruptly. "Do you hear that?" We all listened. Wind, our own breathing, the crunch of gravel beneath our feet, and underneath, almost subsonic, a sound like vast stone doors grinding open. "Keep moving," Lundgren urged. "Don't stop until we're below the tree line." But when we looked back toward Cascade Point, we saw why Klaus had stopped. The station was changing. The buildings seemed to be shifting, their geometry becoming subtly wrong. Angles that should have been perpendicular weren't quite. Walls that should have been parallel converged or diverged in impossible ways. And things were emerging from the old observation post, not walking, but flowing out, as if the doorway had become a breach between different states of reality. The shapes were vaguely humanoid but existed in more dimensions than we could properly perceive. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing, interpreting the forms as constantly shifting between multiple configurations. "Run," Lundgren said quietly, and then louder, "Run!" We ran. Down the mountain through terrain that should have been impassable at that speed, driven by primal fear of what was emerging behind us. I fell twice, bloodying my hands on sharp rocks, feeling my pack straps dig into my shoulders. I didn't slow down. The forest appeared ahead, that boundary Klaus had mentioned, below the tree line. We crashed through the first screen of trees, and suddenly everything changed. The oppressive weight I hadn't fully noticed lifted. The auroras vanished from the sky, replaced by normal blue daylight. The temperature climbed to 20 degrees in seconds. We collapsed against trees, gasping for breath. When we finally looked back up the mountain, Cascade Point was barely visible in the distance. The buildings looked normal from this perspective, just small structures perched on a remote ridgeline. There were no lights, no flowing shapes, no geometric impossibilities, just an empty weather station far above. "It's contained again," Lundgren said, checking his radio. "Communications are restored." He contacted emergency services while we rested. A helicopter extraction was arranged, with an estimated arrival of 3 hours. We waited in that forest, none of us speaking much, each processing what we'd witnessed. Finally, I asked the question that had been building since we fled. What was that? What's really at Cascade Point? Lundgren stared up the mountain for a long moment before answering. The prevailing theory is that Cascade Point sits atop a thin place, a location where the boundaries between different dimensions or realities are more permeable than normal. The electromagnetic anomalies aren't the cause, they're a symptom. The place itself is fundamentally unusual. Why build a station there? Because thin places need to be monitored. If we can't study them in controlled conditions, they'll eventually breach on their own with no protocols or understanding of how to respond. Cascade Point represents an attempt to observe and document dimensional permeability while maintaining enough separation to avoid catastrophic contact. And when that separation fails, then we evacuate, wait for conditions to stabilize, and return to try again with updated protocols and stricter rules. That's insane. Lundgren's smile held no humor. Yes. But someone has to do this work. Someone has to stand at the boundary and watch what wants to cross over. Otherwise, one day it will cross over, unobserved, uncontained, into areas where millions of people live. The helicopter arrived and extracted us. I spent 2 weeks in debriefing, undergoing psychological evaluation, and writing detailed reports about everything I'd experienced. During that time, other researchers returned to Cascade Point, finding it exactly as we'd left it. The old observation post was sealed with new containment procedures. The rules were updated again, adding a 9th rule about evacuation thresholds. At the end of my debriefing, I was offered 3 options: permanent reassignment to a normal weather station, a substantial severance package, or return to Cascade Point with hazard pay, tripled and full awareness of what I'd be monitoring. I chose to return. That was 8 years ago. I'm still here, now serving as senior meteorologist. After Dr. Lundgren's retirement, I train new researchers, help them understand the rules, watch as they experience their first blackout period, their first handprints, their first compression casualty. I see the fear in their eyes when they realize what they've signed up for, and I see the resolve when they choose to stay anyway. Because someone has to maintain the watch. Someone has to stand at the boundary between what is and what wants to be, documenting, observing, understanding as much as we can. The rules keep us safe mostly. They fail sometimes, and we update them when they do. The work is terrifying. It's exhausting. It challenges everything I thought I understood about reality. But it's also the most important research being conducted anywhere. And I can't imagine doing anything else. If you're reading this and thinking about applying for a position at a remote weather station that offers suspiciously high pay, do your research first. Make sure you understand what you're really monitoring. Make sure you can follow rules even when they seem arbitrary. And make sure you're prepared for what happens when reality stops playing by the rules you learned in school. As for me, I'll be here at Cascade Point, watching the instruments, documenting the impossible, and following the rules that keep the boundaries in place. The weather is fascinating, certainly, but it's everything else beyond the weather that makes this job unlike any other. That's what keeps me here year after year, maintaining the watch at the edge of everything we understand and everything we don't. And that's how it ended, or so we assume for now. If this tale kept you on edge, like and share it with a friend who dares to listen, then subscribe for more eerie nights like this one. Thanks for unwinding with me. Sleep tight if you can, and remember, follow the rules, always.